He hadn't flown in over 20 years, but when a child's life hung by a thread and no one else dared to lift off, Dwayne Johnson, the man they called the wrench guy, stepped up. At 53, he was the one with oil-stained gloves, tightening bolts and patching rotor blades at Mountain Crest Emergency Base. To most, he was invisible, a fixture in the background, moving through each day without fanfare or recognition. Some of the younger pilots barely knew his name. They called him Wrench Guy, a label that stuck more out of habit than malice. But that morning changed everything. It wasn't supposed to be anyone's responsibility. A whiteout blizzard rolled in, the power grid failed, and a 9-year-old boy was clinging to life 100 miles away. Every pilot, trained, certified, ready, stood down. Too risky, too dangerous, too blind. But Dwayne didn't. He walked past them, silent and steady, moving through the control room, where doubt hung thick in the air, past the skeptical glances and quiet murmurs, straight into the hangar. There, in a locker that hadn't been opened in decades, he found his old flight helmet. The visor was scratched, the paint chipped, but the pilot inside he had never truly left. "Who even is he?" someone whispered. "He's just the mechanic." Another shrugged. They didn't know. They didn't know that Dwayne had once flown medevac missions through enemy fire, his hands steady as he guided his crew through skies filled with smoke and danger. They didn't know his name had once been spoken in war zones as the pilot everyone prayed would come, but he was coming again, not because anyone asked him to, not because he needed glory or recognition, but because someone had to. This isn't just a story about a man flying a helicopter. It's about quiet courage finding its moment, about someone stepping into the space between life and death when no one else would. And as the blades of the chopper began to spin, as snow started to fall harder against the hangar walls, a truth settled over the base. This wasn't just the mechanic anymore. This was Dwayne Johnson, the man who had been underestimated, overlooked, and quietly carrying a history no one imagined. And today, that history was about to write a new chapter. One where courage would take flight through a blizzard, rewriting what everyone thought they knew. If stories like this move you, stay with us. The one you're about to hear isn't just about flying. It's about what happens when a legend in disguise finally rises. Dwayne Johnson arrived at Mountain Crest Emergency Base every morning at 5:15 a.m. sharp. He never needed an alarm. His hands, scarred and calloused from years of work, moved with a steady rhythm that spoke of experience and patience. Inspect, adjust, repeat. His routine was as predictable as sunrise. Dwayne didn't wear a headset or bark orders into a radio. He wore grease-stained coveralls and carried a clipboard worn from sun and time. To the younger crew, he was just the wrench guy, the man who made sure the medevac helicopters stayed airworthy. They saw him tightening bolts, swapping out fuel filters, wiping down rotor blades with silent precision. He rarely spoke unless asked, never interrupted briefings, and he always drank from his own black steel thermos. Some of the younger pilots, eager and half distracted by their phones, barely glanced his way. "Morning, Dwayne," one would mumble, not even pausing as he scrolled through his messages. "Morning," Dwayne would reply, his eyes already scanning the skids of Helicopter 3. He had worked at Mountain Crest for 14 years. In all that time, he had never called in sick, never left early, and never missed a flight check. But no one really knew him. Not where he came from, not what he used to do, and definitely not what he was still capable of. One morning, as a snowstorm threatened to roll in, a couple of the flight techs in the hangar were laughing about a persistent creak in rotor 2. They spun the blade by hand, snickering like kids. "Better tell the old wrench guy to work his magic," one of them said with a smirk. Dwayne walked past them, laid his hand gently on the blade, and said quietly, "It's not the blade. It's the coupling behind the gearbox. You'll feel it if you listen, not just look." They stared, confused. Dwayne adjusted a bolt, repositioned. the mount, and spun the blade again. This time it was smooth, silent. The laughter stopped. They didn't ask how he knew, didn't question how someone could diagnose a problem from a faint vibration. They just watched him pack up his tools and move on. Later that week, Josh spotted him sitting near the landing pad, his face tilted up to the wind, his eyes half closed. "What are you doing?" Josh asked, half laughing. Dwayne opened one eye and said simply, "Listening to the wind." Josh laughed it off, muttering something about old-timers and their ghost stories. But Dwayne wasn't listening for the weather. He was remembering. Nights when the wind told him whether to lift off or stay grounded. Nights when the sound of the air meant the difference between life and death. Back in the hangar, someone had drawn a cartoon on the whiteboard. A stick figure with short hair, holding a wrench, riding a helicopter like a cowboy. It was labeled Rotor Wrangler. Dwayne saw it, didn't erase it, just smiled. They didn't know. They didn't know that he had once flown into hot zones with only minutes of fuel, that he'd once held the record for the fastest extraction under fire in his unit. They didn't know his name was still etched on a wall of honor, somewhere far from Mountain Crest. All they knew was the wrench guy. But soon, that would change. Not because Dwayne sought glory or revenge, but because when the storm came, and it would come, someone had to be ready. He would be ready. Quiet courage doesn't need an audience. It just waits for the right moment to rise. The story of Dwayne Johnson's past wasn't meant to be discovered, at least not by the ones he worked with now. It began quietly, with Eloise, a young trainee just out of technical school, eager to impress. She had been given the unenviable task of sorting through old maintenance archives in a dusty storage room at Mountain Crest. Most people hated the job, the stale air, the endless stacks of forgotten papers. But Eloise didn't mind. She liked digging, liked uncovering things long buried and overlooked. About 3 hours into her work, she found a battered folder tucked away on a back shelf. Its label was smudged, barely legible, but inside were yellowed flight records, handwritten logs, faded diagrams, and one laminated ID badge. It stopped her cold. The name read, Dwayne Johnson, Medevac Commander. The photo on the badge was younger, but unmistakable. His eyes carried the same quiet strength, the same unwavering focus. Eloise stared at it, realization dawning before. She walked back to the hangar, where Dwayne was kneeling by Helicopter 1, adjusting a pressure gauge. "Hey, Dwayne," she called softly. He didn't look up. "I found something in the archives." She handed him the badge. His hand froze on the wrench, then he slowly took the badge, studying it for a long moment before handing it back. "Keep it," he said quietly. "Probably means more to you now than it does to me." Eloise hesitated, her voice uncertain. "But this says you were a flight commander." Dwayne wiped his hands on a rag and looked at her. "I was." "What happened?" she asked. He stood, meeting her eyes. "I stopped flying," he said simply, his tone giving nothing away. And that was all. No bitterness, no pride, just the plain, quiet truth. But later that day, Eloise couldn't keep the discovery to herself. She told Josh, who told the other techs, and by the next morning, the story was everywhere. Dwayne Johnson, the quiet mechanic, had once been a medevac commander. The details were murky, though, and the crew filled in the gaps with rumors. Some said he had quit because of a crash. Others guessed he'd frozen in combat and been grounded. A few joked he probably just liked fixing machines more than flying them. None of them got it right. None of them knew that Dwayne had once flown 37 consecutive medevac missions during the siege of Sangar Valley. That his final mission had seen him extract 6 wounded soldiers from behind enemy lines, with one rotor half shot and no radio. That when he returned, Brass had offered him medals and a cushy desk job, and Dwayne had turned them down. Because medals didn't bring back the ones he couldn't save, and a desk was too far from the sky. So he had walked away quietly, no fanfare, with nothing but a wrench in his hand. That week, someone had drawn a gold star next to his name on the schedule. Board, labeled in thick Sharpie as Ghost Pilot. Dwayne noticed it, sipped his coffee and didn't react, but Eloise noticed something. Dwayne started humming again, softly, almost too quiet to hear. Old tunes from his flying days. And once she caught him staring up at the sky, his lips moving silently as though speaking to something far above. The storm didn't just roll in, it roared down from the mountains like a force determined to cut everything off from the outside world. For 2 days, Mountain Crest was trapped in white silence, roads closed, power lines down, and no way in or out. Inside the dispatch center, the team huddled around the emergency scanner, tension thick in the air. Then the call came. A boy, just 9 years old, had suffered severe head trauma in a sledding accident in Larkage, a remote town nearly 100 miles northwest. He was unconscious, with no road access and no ambulance available. The only hope was an airlift. The supervisor's voice cut through the quiet. "Which chopper's ready?" Someone answered, "Only Hilo 2, but it's half-fueled and visibility is at 40% and dropping." A beat of silence filled the room. Josh glanced at the map, shaking his head. "No way we make it in and out blind. Not even with GPS." Pilot Ramirez stepped forward, his voice filled with forced bravado. "I'll go. I've flown worse." That's when Dwayne stepped into the room. His eyes scanned the monitor, showing the boy's fading vitals. He didn't speak. Not yet. Ramirez suited up, moving with a confidence that was a little too quick, a little too eager. But just as he was about to climb in, the fuel line alarm blared. A faulty valve, no time to fix it. The bird was grounded. The room went dead silent. The child was still fading. No one else moved. No one else volunteered. And that's when Dwayne did. He didn't announce his decision with a grand speech or dramatic gesture. He simply turned and walked out of dispatch, his steps steady, heading straight down the hall toward a locker no one had opened in years. His hands, calloused and strong, spun the dial with practiced ease, revealing a matte black flight helmet, scratched and well-worn. The name inside was still clear, D. Johnson. He lifted it from the dust, brushing it off like an old friend, then walked into Hangar Bay 3 with a purpose that silenced the whispers. Eloise saw him first, her jaw dropping. "Dwayne, what are you doing?" she called. He met her gaze with quiet determination. "Prepping," he said simply, "the only machine that can get through this storm." "But you're not cleared," she stammered. Dwayne climbed onto the skid, flipped open the maintenance panel. "Cleared or not, someone's flying this bird," he said, his voice calm but unyielding. Josh stepped forward, disbelief on his face. "You're serious?" Dwayne met his eyes. "You know anyone else here who's landed in zero visibility with no radar, one rotor failing, and a heart monitor flatlining in the back seat?" The room fell silent. Eloise, after a heartbeat's hesitation, did the unexpected. She grabbed a headset and handed it to Dwayne. "Comms are yours," she said. Dwayne nodded once. Eloise climbed in beside him. Josh called out, "You need help?" Dwayne paused, eyes steady. "You want to ride?" Josh blinked, stunned, then nodded. "I thought you'd never ask." The blades started to spin, whirring against the rising wind. One by one, the crew gathered, watching, filming, whispering. "He's really going," someone said. "No one flies in this," another muttered. "He's going to crash." But Dwayne's hands were steady as he adjusted the seat, the helmet fitting like a second skin. He gripped the controls with a familiarity that spoke of years in the cockpit, not forgotten, but waiting. Eloise's voice came through the radio, her tone clear and steady. "This is Hilo 3. We are lifting off with Commander Dwayne Johnson at the stick." The reply crackled back with disbelief. Repeat that? Eloise smiled faintly. You heard me. Dwayne glanced once toward the sky, the snow already thickening, a wall of white. But he wasn't afraid. Flying wasn't just something he used to do. It was something that had never left him. As the chopper lifted, it vanished into the storm within seconds. No shape, no shadow, just the faint pulse of rotor blades fading into the blizzard. Inside the cockpit, Dwayne's hands stayed firm, guiding them through the swirling whiteout. The instruments flickered, the wind roared against the windshield, but his voice remained steady, a quiet strength in the storm. Josh, sitting beside him, said nothing. Even he knew this wasn't just a flight, it was survival. No GPS, Dwayne said, scanning the blizzard. We're flying by instinct. Josh glanced at him, nervous. You've done this before? Dwayne didn't answer right away. I have to, he said softly, and he had. He had done this in worse conditions, under fire, with less to guide him. But this was different. This wasn't combat. This was a blizzard, a race against time, against the storm, against fate itself. Dwayne turned slightly east, banking low. I'm following the river, he said. Josh checked the map, squinting through the haze. You can't see it. Dwayne gave a faint smile. Doesn't mean it's not there. They flew in silence, the storm pressing in, the whiteout so dense it felt like flying through a wall. But Dwayne wasn't flying blind. He was flying with memory, instinct, and a determination born of experience. In that moment, he wasn't the wrench guy anymore. He was a pilot, one who had never truly left the sky. The landing was rough, but clean. Josh exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for minutes, and the moment the rotors settled, Eloise's voice crackled through the comms, thick with static and relief. Tell me you made it. Josh grabbed the mic, his hands trembling slightly. She made it, we're on the roof. Silence. Then the words came back, sharp with emotion. Copy that, they're bringing the kid up now. Dwayne stepped out of the chopper, the wind biting at his face, snow swirling around him. He didn't flinch. This was the moment he was built for, not medals, not applause, but moments where someone's life depended on calm hands and clear thinking. A nurse rushed over with the boy, wrapped tight in blankets, his skin pale and his breathing shallow. Dwayne helped strap him into the medevac stretcher, checked the pulse, steady though faint, and climbed back into the cockpit. Josh glanced at him, his expression transformed from skepticism to stunned respect. You're not just the wrench guy, he said quietly. Dwayne looked at him, eyes calm, voice steady. No, I'm the one who gets them home. The return flight was worse than the outbound. The storm had thickened, the air heavier, colder, meaner. Dwayne's hands never wavered on the controls, his movements precise and practiced. Josh monitored the boy's vitals every minute, calling out readings, keeping him alive with hope and vigilance. The wind slammed into the tail rotor as they crossed the ridge, the chopper lurching sideways. Josh braced himself against the panel, but Dwayne didn't panic. He adjusted pitch, leaned into the gusts, coaxed the aircraft forward with murmured encouragement. Come on, girl, he whispered. Just a little more. Josh glanced at him, amazed. You talk to the chopper? Dwayne gave a small nod, his mouth tightening in focus. Every good pilot does. Daylight was slipping away. The approach to Mountain Crest was tight, fog pressing down like a suffocating blanket. Eloise's voice came through the radio again, tense but hopeful. We've cleared the pad. You're good to land. Dwayne's voice was low, controlled. Negative. Visibility's too low. I'm taking the clearing behind the station. Josh frowned. That's not marked. Dwayne's grip tightened on the controls. Doesn't have to be. I trained there. Ahead, faint beams of light cut through the mist as ground crew trucks circled the lot, their headlights forming. A makeshift landing pad, Dwayne lowered the skids slowly, precisely, until the chopper touched down with barely a jolt. The moment the rotors stopped, a roar erupted from the crew. Not news cameras, not officials, just the people who had once ignored him, now cheering, clapping, some wiping their eyes. Josh climbed down, cradling the boy in his arms. Dwayne followed, helmet in hand, boots crunching on the snow. Commander Dalton, the base director, rushed over, stopping in his tracks as he took in the scene. "You flew that bird?" he asked, incredulous. Dwayne gave a single nod. Dalton's face flushed. "Who cleared you?" Eloise stepped forward, her voice steady. "I did." Dalton's face darkened. "This is a violation of protocol." Dwayne took a step closer, his tone calm but firm. "No, the violation would have been leaving a child to die because of a checklist." Dalton's mouth opened, but before he could speak, a new voice cut through, deep and resonant. "I know that tone." They turned to see a tall man in a coat, silver stars gleaming on his shoulders. General Markson, retired Air Rescue Command. He looked at Dwayne with recognition. "You're Johnson, aren't you?" Dwayne nodded. "You flew my nephew out of Basra," Markson said. Dwayne's expression softened. "I remember. He had a shrapnel wound." Markson smiled. "I sent you a thank you letter." Dwayne shrugged. "I didn't fly for thank yous." Markson turned to Dalton, his voice sharp. "This man is a legend and you grounded him. Reinstate his flight credentials. Immediately." Dalton hesitated, but Markson's stare brooked no argument. The room filled with the sound of applause. Josh stepped closer, his voice low. "You okay?" Dwayne let out a long, slow breath. "Feels strange," Josh grinned. "Feels earned." As the crowd gathered around him, someone whispered, "He's not just the wrench guy anymore." And for the first time in 20 years, Dwayne smiled back. The story of Dwayne Johnson didn't end with a single heroic flight. The buzz spread. Fast. Local news first, then national. A 53-year-old mechanic turned pilot flying blind through a blizzard to save a child. They called it brave. They called it impossible. But for Dwayne, it was just another day of doing the right thing. Despite the attention, Dwayne didn't bask in the glory. He returned to the hangar, quietly checking oil levels, replacing hydraulic lines, and making sure the helicopters were ready for whatever came next. But the world didn't let him fade into the background this time. Reporters gathered at the gates, veterans sent letters, and pilots from all over reached out, hoping to meet the man who had become an unexpected legend. One even wrote, "I trained because of a story I once heard about you. I didn't know. It was real." Dwayne ignored most of it, preferring the quiet hum of the hangar and the rhythm of the tools in his hands. But eventually, Mountain Crest organized a formal recognition ceremony, not a grand event, just a gathering on the landing pad where the entire base came together. Dwayne wore his old flight jacket, the patch from Sangar Valley still visible, its colors faded, but its meaning undiminished. General Markson took the microphone and shared stories no one had heard before. Classified missions, lives saved, and a pilot who never sought the spotlight but made sure others came home. When he turned to Dwayne, his voice was filled with respect. "You were never forgotten by those who mattered," he said. Dwayne didn't respond. He didn't need to. After the ceremony, the base director asked him, "What do you want, Dwayne? A title, a medal? We'll give you anything." Dwayne thought for a long moment before answering softly, "Let me teach." The director blinked. "Teach?" Dwayne nodded. "Not everyone gets a second chance to fly, but they all deserve to know how." And so, the Dwayne Johnson Flight Initiative was born, a mentorship program for veteran women, retired medics, and underserved youth, training them in aircraft safety, emergency piloting, and aerial rescue. Dwayne didn't ask for a paycheck or control. He just showed up every morning at 5:15, same as always. Talk, inspect, adjust, teach. Josh became his first trainee, Eloise his second, Each session began the same way. Dwayne would hold up his helmet and say, "This doesn't make you brave. Knowing when to lift off and when not to, that's what keeps people alive." The crew listened closely, taking notes, absorbing lessons that weren't in any manual. Slowly, Dwayne Johnson transformed from legend to mentor, from a man with a past to a guide shaping futures. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, a young cadet asked him, "Why didn't you fight harder to stay in the air all those years ago?" Dwayne looked toward the horizon, his voice thoughtful. "I thought my time was over," he said quietly. "Was it?" the cadet pressed. A faint smile touched Dwayne's lips. "Turns out legends don't retire, they just wait." Dwayne never asked for applause, never stood at the front of the room. But by simply showing up every day, he became the center of it. His students called him Coach D. Some of the older techs still called him Commander. But to Dwayne, he was just a teacher, someone passing on the knowledge that had saved lives. He shared things no manual could teach. How to listen to the wind through your fingertips, how to feel an engine's heartbeat through the floor panel, how to stay calm when everything around you was chaos. He reminded them, pilots don't control the sky. They cooperate with it. That was his way. Occasionally, visitors stopped by the hangar. People who had heard his story, who wanted to shake his hand or tell him he was an inspiration. Dwayne always gave the same response. "I didn't do anything special. I just didn't let the fear stop me." Then he'd hand them a wrench and say, "Now go fix something." One crisp afternoon, Dwayne stood by the training helicopter, watching his newest student, a nervous teenage girl, prepare for her first lift. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with the checklist. Dwayne knelt beside her, handed her the helmet, and said softly, "Breathe. Feel your feet. The sky's not your enemy. It's just waiting on you." The girl nodded, swallowing her fear. Dwayne stepped back as the rotors spun. The helicopter lifted, shaky at first, but steady, rising into the sky. Behind him, Josh and Eloise stood watching. Eloise whispered, "She reminds me of you." Dwayne tilted his head thoughtfully. "She's better," he said, a quiet pride shining in his eyes. Just then, a little girl, maybe 9 years old, ran across the field toward him. She wore oversized boots and clutched a toy helicopter in her arms. "Mr. Dwayne," she said breathlessly, "do you think I could fly one day?" Dwayne knelt to her level, his voice warm and steady. "Sweetheart," he said, "you already are." And as they stood together, watching the sky stretch wide and open above them, it became clear to everyone there. Legends don't retire. They rise again and again. Dwayne Johnson didn't need applause. He didn't need the front row or a stage. Yet somehow, by simply showing up every day, he became the center of everything. The quiet hero, the mechanic, the mentor, the legend, whatever they called him. He remained the same man who once flew through storms, not for glory, but because someone had to. He became the teacher who passed on wisdom not found in manuals. The kind you learn by listening to the wind, feeling the pulse of the machine, and trusting your gut when everything around you screams chaos. "Pilots don't control the sky," he told his students. "They cooperate with it." His words weren't just lessons, they were a lifeline. People from everywhere came to meet him. Some shook his hand, others asked for pictures, and many told him he was an inspiration. Dwayne always gave the same answer. "I didn't do anything special," he said. "I just didn't let fear stop me." And then he'd hand them a wrench, with a smile. "Now go fix something." One chilly afternoon, as he stood near the training helicopter watching a nervous teenager prepare for her first lift, she fumbled her checklist, her hands shaking. Dwayne knelt beside her, handed her the helmet, and said softly, "Breathe, feel your feet. The sky's not your enemy, it's just waiting for you." She nodded, took a deep breath, and the helicopter lifted, shaky at first, but steady. Behind them, Josh and Eloise watched in silence. Eloise whispered, "She reminds me of you." Dwayne tilted his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. "She's better," he said, his eyes shining with quiet pride. Just then, a little girl, 9 years old, clutching a toy helicopter, ran across the field toward him. Her oversized boots crunched in the snow, her breath visible in the cold air. "Mr. Dwayne," she said breathlessly, "do you think I could fly one day?" He knelt to her level, his voice warm and certain. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "you already are." And as they stood there, watching the sky open wide above them, everyone who saw them understood the truth. Legends don't retire, they rise again and again. If this story moved you, made you feel something deeper than words, don't just leave it here. Like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us, what would you do if your moment of courage came? And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because we're just getting started. There are more stories of unsung heroes, more moments where ordinary people become extraordinary. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that legends never retire. They rise again. And remember, the sky isn't the limit. It's just the beginning.